Have you ever thought about why the most powerful people in history never seem to get their hands dirty? Why is it that when empires fall, when companies collapse, when scandals erupt, there's always someone else holding the smoking gun while the true architect walks away untouched? This video will change how you see power, reputation, and the invisible architecture of influence that governs our world. Today, we're diving into Law 26 from the 48 Laws of Power: Keep your hands clean. But this isn't just about avoiding blame. This is about understanding one of the darkest patterns in human civilization, a pattern so ancient it's woven into our evolutionary psychology, yet so modern it's happening right now in every boardroom, every government, every social media platform you scroll through. Let me tell you a story about human nature that will make everything clear. 200,000 years ago, when our ancestors lived in small tribes on the African savanna, something remarkable was happening. Unlike other primates who relied purely on physical dominance, humans were developing something far more sophisticated: the ability to manipulate social perception. The strongest warrior wasn't always the leader. Often, it was the one who could orchestrate events from the shadows, the one who could make others do the dirty work while maintaining their own pristine reputation within the tribe. This wasn't just a survival strategy. It was an evolutionary advantage. The individual who could mobilize group violence without personally wielding the spear, who could initiate necessary but brutal actions without being seen as the aggressor, this person survived longer, reproduced more successfully, and passed on these cognitive abilities to future generations. We are the descendants of those master manipulators. This capacity lives in your brain right now. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and we see this principle refined into an art form. Let me tell you about Cesare Borgia, the inspiration behind Machiavelli's The Prince. Cesare understood Law 26 better than perhaps anyone in history. When he conquered the Romagna region of Italy, he faced a problem. The area was lawless, filled with petty tyrants and criminals. The people were suffering, but establishing order would require brutal violence, violence that would make him hated. So what did Cesare do? He appointed a man named Ramiro de Orco as his governor. De Orco was efficient, ruthless, and terrifying. He crushed the criminals, executed the corrupt nobles, and established order through sheer brutality. The Romagna became peaceful, but the people feared and hated de Orco with a passion that burned in every heart. Then, at the perfect moment, Cesare made his move. One morning, the people of Cesena woke to find Ramiro de Orco's body in the town square, cut in half, with a wooden block and a bloody knife beside him. The message was clear: Cesare had punished the tyrant who had oppressed them. The same man who had orchestrated every act of violence, who had given every brutal order, was now their liberator. The people loved him. Cesare's hands remained clean. This isn't just ancient history. This is the blueprint that runs our modern world. Think about every major corporation you know. When there's a scandal, when toxic products are released, when massive layoffs destroy thousands of lives, who takes the fall? Never the CEO who approved the strategy. Never the board members who voted for the cuts. It's always the middle manager, the regional director, the convenient scapegoat who was just following orders from above. Let me give you a contemporary example that perfectly illustrates this law in action. Look at the relationship between tech giants and content moderation. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, these platforms host billions of pieces of content. Some of that content is harmful, illegal, or dangerous. These companies must moderate it, but moderation is messy. It requires making thousands of controversial decisions every day. Decisions that will anger millions of people no matter what you choose. So what do these companies do? They don't build massive in-house moderation teams under their own brand. They outsource to third-party companies in developing countries. When something goes wrong, when a terrorist video stays up too long, when legitimate speech gets censored, who gets blamed? The outsourcing company. The algorithm. The moderators in Manila or Mumbai. Never the executives in Silicon Valley who design the system, who set the policies, who profit from every click. Their hands remain clean. This is the same pattern Cesare Borgia used 500 years ago, just dressed in modern corporate language. The technology changes, but human nature remains constant. Now, here's where this gets really dark, and I need you to pay close attention because this is the twist that most people miss. Law 26 isn't just about avoiding blame. It's about something far more sinister. It's about maintaining the illusion of virtue while committing necessary evils. And that word, necessary, is crucial. Because the uncomfortable truth is that power often requires actions that society condemns. Progress often demands destruction. Order often requires violence. Success often necessitates ruthlessness. Every functioning society, every successful organization, every empire that has ever existed has had to do terrible things to survive. The question isn't whether these things happen. They do. They must. The question is who gets associated with them and who remains pure in the public imagination. Think about the paradox of leadership. A CEO must sometimes fire thousands of workers to save a company. A president must sometimes authorize drone strikes that kill civilians to protect national security. A founder must sometimes betray early partners to secure funding that ensures the company's survival. These actions might be strategically necessary, they might even be morally defensible in the long run, but they're never popular in the moment. They stain your reputation. They create enemies. They give your rivals ammunition. This is why Law 26 exists. It's not about being evil. It's about understanding that reputation and reality operate on different planes. You can be the architect of something brutal yet necessary, or you can be perceived as the architect. Being both simultaneously destroys you. The skill is separating these two identities, using others as the visible hand while you remain the invisible mind. Let me take you deeper into the psychology here, because this is where it gets truly fascinating. Human beings have what cognitive scientists call the halo effect. When we perceive someone as good in one area, we assume they're good in all areas. When someone has a pristine reputation, we literally cannot process evidence that contradicts that image. Our brains actively filter out information that doesn't match our established perception. This is why keeping your hands clean isn't just about what you do. It's about what people believe you would never do. Once you establish an image of purity, of ethical behavior, of clean hands, you create a psychological shield. Even when evidence emerges of your involvement in something questionable, people's brains resist accepting it. They'll blame others. They'll create alternative explanations. They'll bend reality itself to preserve their image of you. The most powerful people in history have understood this instinctively. They cultivate an image so pristine, so morally elevated, that accusations slide off them like water off marble. Meanwhile, they're orchestrating everything from behind the scenes, using proxies, intermediaries, and scapegoats to execute their will. Look at how this plays out in modern politics. Politicians who want to pass unpopular but necessary legislation often use a brilliant technique. They don't champion the bill themselves. They get a junior member of their party, someone expendable, someone whose career can be sacrificed, to be the public face of the legislation. That person takes all the heat, absorbs all the anger, becomes the target of protests and media attacks. Meanwhile, the senior politician who actually wrote the bill, who provided the votes, who made it happen, they express measured support but maintain distance. When the bill passes and proves effective, they claim credit. When it fails or causes backlash, the junior member gets blamed. The senior politician's hands remain clean. This is happening right now, today, in every parliament, every Congress, every political system on Earth. It's not a conspiracy. It's not even really unethical in the traditional sense. It's just how power actually works beneath the mythology we tell ourselves about leadership and responsibility. But here's what makes this law truly dangerous, and why you need to understand both how to use it and how to defend against it. Law 26 creates a class system of culpability. In any organization, there are people whose job is to get things done, to make the hard decisions, to implement the brutal policies, and there are people whose job is to look good, to maintain relationships, to preserve the institutional image. The people in the first category are expendable. The people in the second category are untouchable. If you don't understand this distinction, you will volunteer to be in the first category. You'll think you're being helpful, being a team player, being effective. And you are. But you're also painting a target on your back. The moment something goes wrong, you're gone. Your career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. And the person who gave you the orders, who approved your actions, who benefited from your results, they'll shake their heads sadly at your poor judgment and move on to the next expendable soldier. I've seen this pattern play out hundreds of times in my research. The ambitious middle manager who implements an aggressive cost-cutting program that the executives designed. When employees revolt, the manager gets fired for being insensitive to company culture. The lawyers who draft the aggressive contracts that the CEO demands. When clients sue, the lawyers get disbarred for unethical practices while the CEO claims he trusted his legal team. The engineers who build the features that maximize user engagement through psychological manipulation. When the backlash comes, they get condemned for dark patterns while the product executives who set the metrics get promoted for driving growth. Do you see the pattern? The people who actually understand power remain abstract, strategic, and clean. They deal in directives, not details. They set goals, not methods. They maintain what I call strategic distance. Close enough to control outcomes, far enough to deny responsibility. Now, let's talk about how this law operates in the digital age, because social media has created new dimensions to this ancient principle. In the past, keeping your hands clean required elaborate schemes, intermediaries, complex chains of command. Today, it's easier than ever, yet most people completely miss how it's being done to them. Consider influencer culture and brand partnerships. A major corporation wants to sell you something, but direct advertising is losing effectiveness. People have developed advertising blindness. They scroll past ads without even seeing them. So what do these corporations do? They pay influencers to authentically recommend their products. The influencer makes content that feels personal, genuine, and trustworthy. You buy the product because you trust the influencer. But here's the key: when the product is terrible, when it's overpriced, when it's actively harmful, who gets blamed? The influencer. Not the corporation that manufactured the product, not the executives who designed it to be addictive or exploitative, not the marketers who identified vulnerable demographics to target. No, the influencer gets canceled. Their career implodes. They become the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, the corporation quietly moves on to the next batch of influencers, having learned exactly which tactics work and which create too much exposure. The corporation's hands remain clean. They were simply providing a product and a marketing budget. The influencer was the one who made claims, who built false trust, who exploited their audience. Except, of course, the corporation orchestrated every element of this dynamic. They just had the wisdom to keep strategic distance. This pattern is everywhere once you learn to see it. Gig economy platforms and worker exploitation. The platform maintains pristine corporate citizenship while drivers and delivery workers bear all the risk, instability, and public backlash. Political action committees and campaign finance. Candidates maintain clean images while PACs run brutal attack ads, spread misinformation, and destroy opponents. The candidate can always claim they don't control the PAC, even when everyone knows the coordination is absolute. Artificial intelligence and algorithmic decision-making. This might be the most sophisticated evolution of Law 26 yet created. Companies are increasingly using algorithms to make decisions that would be controversial if a human made them. Deny insurance claims, reject loan applications, fire workers, adjust prices based on psychological vulnerability. When people get angry, the company says, "We're just following what the algorithm determined." The algorithm is blamed. The algorithm becomes the scapegoat. But who designed the algorithm? Who chose the training data? Who decided which outcomes to optimize for? Humans. Humans with names, humans in boardrooms, humans who profit from every decision. But their hands remain clean because they've inserted an artificial layer of plausible deniability. We're entering an era where the most powerful people on Earth will be able to shape reality while remaining completely invisible to those affected by their decisions. The algorithm decided. The AI determined. The system concluded. These phrases are becoming the modern equivalent of Cesare Borgia's execution of Ramiro de Orco. A public spectacle that absolves the true architect. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This is deeply cynical. This is teaching people to be manipulative, to avoid responsibility, to become exactly the kind of power-hungry sociopath that's destroying our society. And I understand that reaction. It's the reaction of someone who still believes in the mythology of transparent leadership and personal accountability. Let me challenge that belief. Here's the uncomfortable truth: the world is already divided between those who understand Law 26 and those who don't. The people who understand it are running everything. They're your bosses, your political leaders, the executives of every major institution. They're already using these principles, every single day, to maintain and expand their power while you operate under the naive assumption that good work and ethical behavior will protect you. They won't. In fact, ethical behavior without strategic positioning makes you the perfect scapegoat. You're the person who can be trusted to do the right thing, which means you're the person who can be trusted to take the fall when the right thing produces the wrong optics. Understanding Law 26 isn't about becoming evil. It's about developing what I call sophisticated innocence. It's the ability to achieve necessary objectives while maintaining the social capital and reputation that allows you to continue operating effectively. It's recognizing that in the real world, in the world of actual consequences and actual power, there's a difference between being responsible and being held responsible. And the people who change the world, who build lasting institutions, who actually accomplish meaningful things, they've mastered that distinction. Let me give you a different kind of example, one that might shift your perspective. Consider the history of social reform movements. The civil rights movement in America. We remember Martin Luther King Jr. as the face of the movement, and rightfully so. His speeches, his moral clarity, his willingness to suffer for the cause, all of it was essential and heroic. But behind the scenes, there was another level of strategy happening. King had advisors who understood that for the movement to succeed, it needed to maintain moral purity in the public eye while also applying real pressure, real disruption, real force. So they created a division of labor. King remained the voice of nonviolence and moral authority. His hands stayed clean. Meanwhile, more militant activists, sometimes with the quiet blessing of King's inner circle, applied pressure through more aggressive tactics. When those tactics created backlash, King could publicly distance himself, preserving his moral authority while still benefiting from the pressure those tactics created. Was this manipulative? Yes. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Without that strategic use of Law 26, maintaining King's pristine moral image while still applying real pressure to the power structure, the civil rights movement might not have succeeded. The cause was just, but justice doesn't triumph without strategy. Even righteous movements must understand power. This is what I mean by sophisticated innocence. It's not about being evil. It's about being effective. It's understanding that changing the world requires both moral clarity and strategic ruthlessness, and that these qualities are most powerful when they're separated into different roles, different people, different public identities. Think about any successful revolution, any major social change, any transformation of human civilization. Behind every idealistic figurehead, there were ruthless strategists. Behind every public hero, there were people doing the dirty work. Behind every movement that changed history, there was a sophisticated understanding of Law 26, keep the symbol pure, and do the necessary darkness through other channels. Now, let's get practical. How does this apply to your life? Most of you watching this aren't running countries or corporations. You're navigating office politics, managing small teams, building careers, trying to launch projects. Does Law 26 still matter? Absolutely. In fact, it might matter more for you than for anyone else, because you have fewer resources to protect yourself when things go wrong. Here's how this law operates at the everyday level. You're in a meeting. Someone needs to deliver bad news to a client, tell an employee they're being let go, inform a department their project is being cancelled. There's always that moment of silence where everyone looks around, waiting to see who will volunteer. Most people, good people, responsible people, they volunteer. They think they're being helpful, showing initiative, demonstrating leadership. What they're actually doing is volunteering to be associated with failure, disappointment, and anger. The person who understands Law 26 does something different. They frame the situation so that the necessary action happens, but someone else executes it. Maybe they ask a question: shouldn't we get input from someone closer to the client relationship? Maybe they suggest a process: perhaps the department head should deliver this message directly to maintain organizational hierarchy. Maybe they simply stay quiet while someone else volunteers. The outcome is the same: the bad news gets delivered, but they've kept their hands clean. This sounds small, almost petty. But these small moments accumulate over a career. The person who's never associated with bad news, with difficult decisions, with unpopular actions, their reputation compounds positively. They become known as the steady one, the diplomatic one, the one who builds bridges while others burn them. Meanwhile, the person who keeps volunteering to handle the difficult situations, they become known as the hatchet man, the bearer of bad news, the one associated with every failure and difficulty. Even when they're just executing decisions made by others, even when they're being helpful and responsible, their reputation deteriorates. Over time, this creates two career trajectories. One person keeps rising because they're seen as above the fray, clean, trustworthy in that halo effect way we discussed. The other person plateaus or falls because they're associated with too many failures, too many unpopular decisions, too much negativity. Same talent, same work ethic, completely different outcomes. The only difference is understanding Law 26. But here's where it gets even more sophisticated. The truly advanced application of this law isn't just about avoiding association with negative outcomes. It's about creating a system where positive outcomes are associated with you and negative outcomes are systematically directed away from you. This requires building what I call a reputation architecture. Think about how this works in practice. You're leading a project with uncertain outcomes. If it succeeds, you want credit. If it fails, you want distance. So you structure the project in a specific way. You remain the strategist, the advisor, the one who provides resources and removes obstacles. But you put someone else, someone ambitious and eager to prove themselves, in the role of project manager, the visible leader executing the day-to-day decisions. If the project succeeds, you generously share credit. In fact, you might even give the project manager most of the public credit. This seems counterintuitive, but it's brilliant strategy. You're demonstrating humility in team leadership, which enhances your reputation even more than direct credit would. Meanwhile, everyone who matters knows you were the architect. You get the genuine credit where it counts, with senior leadership, while maintaining your image as a generous mentor. But if the project fails, the project manager takes the fall. They were in charge of execution, after all. You can express disappointment, analyze what went wrong, maybe even keep the project manager on for a smaller role to show you're not vindictive. But the failure sticks to them, not you. Your judgment and strategy is never questioned because you maintain that strategic distance from the execution. Your hands remain clean. This is how people rise to the top of organizations while others, often more talented and harder working, remain stuck in middle management. It's not about talent. It's not even really about politics in the negative sense. It's about understanding the architecture of reputation and blame. Let me share another pattern that's crucial to understand. In any organization, there are two types of knowledge: credited knowledge and blamed knowledge. Credited knowledge is being right about positive outcomes. Blamed knowledge is being right about negative outcomes. Most people think being right is always valuable. It's not. If you correctly predict a disaster, if you're the one who warned everyone that the project would fail, that the strategy was flawed, that the decision would backfire, and you're proven right, you don't get credit for wisdom. You get blamed for negativity. People associate you with the failure even though you opposed it. Your name becomes linked with the disaster because you're the one who predicted it. In hindsight, people even start to wonder if you sabotaged it, if your negativity became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is deeply irrational, but it's how human psychology works. We associate messengers with messages, predictors with outcomes, even when they oppose those outcomes. Understanding this is crucial for keeping your hands clean. The sophisticated operator learns to handle negative predictions very carefully. If they see disaster coming, they don't announce it loudly. They don't send emails documenting their concerns. They don't go on record with their warnings. Instead, they quietly start distancing themselves from the project. They become busy with other priorities. They delegate their involvement. If forced to comment, they express measured concerns through questions rather than declarations. They stay ambiguous enough that when the disaster hits, they can't be associated with either the failure or the prediction of failure. They simply weren't deeply involved. Their hands remain clean. Meanwhile, the person who responsibly raised concerns, who tried to prevent the disaster, who acted ethically by warning others, that person gets tainted by association. They become known as the negative one, the person who's always predicting doom, the one who was involved with that failed project. The irony is almost poetic. The ethical actor gets punished while the strategic operator who protected their reputation remains untouched. This is the dark truth at the heart of Law 26. It's not that bad people use these tactics and good people don't. It's that successful people, people who actually maintain the power to do good over the long term, understand these dynamics. And unsuccessful people, no matter how talented or ethical, get chewed up by these dynamics because they don't understand them. Now, let's talk about the defense against Law 26, because if you're not using it, it's being used on you. How do you protect yourself from being someone else's Ramiro de Orco? How do you avoid becoming the scapegoat in someone else's power play? First, you need to develop what I call responsibility awareness. Before you agree to any task, any project, any role, ask yourself, if this goes wrong, whose reputation suffers? If the answer is primarily yours, and the upside is primarily someone else's, you're being set up as a scapegoat. This doesn't mean you refuse, sometimes you have to take these roles, but you go in with eyes open. Second, practice strategic documentation. When you're executing someone else's strategy, when you're implementing decisions made above your level, document the decision-making process. Not in a way that seems defensive or that creates tension, but simply as normal professional practice. Emails confirming strategy, meeting notes capturing key decisions, progress reports that reference the original objectives. This creates a paper trail that shows you were executing a strategy, not creating it. If things go wrong, you have evidence of the true decision-makers. Third, build your own reputation architecture. Don't just execute other people's visions. Have your own projects, your own initiatives, your own victories that are clearly yours. If your entire professional identity is being the person who implements other people's strategies, you have no independent reputation to fall back on when you're used as a scapegoat. You need your own wins, your own relationships, your own reputation separate from any single project or leader. Fourth, and this is crucial, learn to say no strategically. Not to everything, not in a way that makes you seem difficult or uncooperative, but to specific high-risk, low-reward situations where you're likely to be set up for blame. The person who's always available for every difficult task seems responsible, but they're actually just accumulating blame exposure. The person who's selectively available, who has good reasons for why they can't take on certain tasks, who helps find alternative solutions rather than just volunteering, that person is actually managing their career strategically. And fifth, if you realize you've been set up as a scapegoat, if you can see Law 26 being used against you, don't go down quietly. This doesn't mean being vindictive or burning bridges, but it does mean making sure the truth comes out. Speak to the decision-makers, present the documentation, explain the actual chain of events. Sometimes this saves you. Sometimes it doesn't. But it at least makes using you as a scapegoat costly enough that people think twice before doing it again, to you or to others. The deeper pattern here, the thing that makes Law 26 so persistent across all of human history, is that organizations need scapegoats. When things go wrong, people need someone to blame. It's a psychological necessity. The anger, the disappointment, the fear that comes with failure, it needs a target. If that target is the leader, the organization destabilizes. If there's no target at all, the anxiety just festers. So organizations instinctively create scapegoat roles, positions that exist to absorb blame while protecting the leadership. If you don't understand this dynamic, you'll end up in one of those roles. You'll think you're being given opportunity, responsibility, trust. And in a sense, you are. But you're also being given exposure, risk, and potential sacrifice. The question isn't whether these roles exist, they must exist for organizations to function. The question is whether you understand them well enough to either avoid them or to use them as stepping stones rather than career graves. Let me take you even deeper into the philosophy of this law, because there's a layer that most people never consider. Law 26 is ultimately about the relationship between power and morality. Most people think powerful people are immoral, that they succeed by being ruthless and unethical. This is wrong. The most successful, most enduring power is almost always associated with strong moral standing. Look at any institution that's lasted centuries. Religious organizations, royal families, elite universities, prestigious corporations. They all cultivate intense moral authority. They're not amoral or immoral. They're hypermoral in their public presentation. The secret is that they've separated moral identity from necessary actions. The institution maintains its moral standing while individual actors, usually temporary and replaceable actors, do the things necessary to maintain power and resources. When those actions become known or create backlash, the actors are removed, punished, condemned by the very institution that empowered them. The institution's moral standing is reinforced through this condemnation. The hands remain clean. This is why abuse scandals in religious organizations follow such a predictable pattern. Individual priests or pastors are found to have committed terrible acts. The organization expresses shock and horror. The individuals are removed and prosecuted. The organization claims to be cleaning house, returning to its values. But the structural conditions that enable the abuse, the institutional priorities that led to covering it up, the leadership that made the decisions, all of that remains intact. Because the organization has successfully used Law 26. The individuals had the dirty hands. The institution remains pure. You see this in every long-lasting power structure. Corporations and environmental damage. The corporation remains a respected institution while individual executives get prosecuted. Governments and human rights abuses. The nation remains legitimate while individual officers go to trial. Universities and admissions scandals. The institution remains prestigious while individual administrators face consequences. The pattern is always the same: separate the moral identity of the institution from the actions necessary to maintain that institution's power. This creates a profound philosophical problem. If morality and power are fundamentally separated through Law 26, if the most ethical seeming institutions are often the ones most effectively using scapegoats to maintain their pristine image, then what does morality even mean in the context of power? Is there such a thing as ethical power, or is all power ultimately based on this same ancient trick of keeping your hands clean while getting them dirty through proxies? I don't have a comfortable answer to that question. I don't think anyone does. What I can tell you is that understanding Law 26 forces you to see power as it actually operates rather than as we pretend it operates. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll notice it everywhere. In every organization you're part of, in every news story you read, in every political movement, every business success, every institutional failure. The pattern is always there: someone's hands are dirty, and someone else's hands are clean, and that separation is strategic, not accidental. The question you have to ask yourself is, what do I do with this knowledge? Do I use it to protect myself in a world where others are certainly using it? Do I use it to advance my own goals, to build power, to achieve things I believe are important? Or do I reject it, operate with transparent accountability, and accept that I'll likely be outmaneuvered by those who understand these dynamics better? There's no right answer that applies to everyone. It depends on your goals, your values, your position, your circumstances. But here's what I know for certain: pretending Law 26 doesn't exist won't protect you from it. Ignorance of these dynamics doesn't grant you immunity. It just makes you more vulnerable. If you want to change the world, if you want to build something lasting, if you want to have real influence, you need to understand how power actually works. Not how we wish it worked, not how inspiring TED Talks say it works, but how it actually operates in the real world, where reputations matter more than reality and perception determines outcomes. Law 26 is uncomfortable because it reveals that the game has always been rigged in a specific way. The people at the top maintain their position not just through competence or even ruthlessness, but through a sophisticated system of reputation management that most people don't even realize is happening. They've built entire careers, entire legacies, on the principle of keeping their hands clean while orchestrating everything from the shadows. And here's the final dark truth, the climax of this entire analysis. The reason this law works so well, the reason it's been effective for thousands of years across every human culture, is that we want to believe in clean hands. We need heroes. We need leaders we can trust. We need institutions we can have faith in. The psychological comfort of believing that somewhere, someone is pure, someone is untainted, someone has moral authority, that comfort is so powerful that we'll actively ignore evidence to the contrary. We'll blame the scapegoats. We'll believe the explanations. We'll maintain the illusion because the alternative, that all power involves dirty hands and the cleanest appearing hands are just the most strategically managed, is too disturbing to accept. So Law 26 doesn't just work because powerful people are clever. It works because all of us, collectively, are desperate to believe in clean hands. We're complicit in the illusion because the truth is too uncomfortable. We make scapegoats work because we need them to work. We need to believe that when someone is punished, justice has been served and the institution is clean again. This is the trap. This is what makes Law 26 so dangerous and so enduring. It's not just a tactic used by individuals. It's a collective psychological pattern that entire societies participate in. We create the conditions for our own manipulation because the alternative would require us to abandon the comforting belief in pure leadership and moral institutions. So what do you do with this power? What do you do with the knowledge that the world is governed by this ancient principle of strategic innocence? That every institution you trust, every leader you admire, every success story you've heard, likely involves someone whose role was to keep their hands clean while others got them dirty. You have to make a choice. You can use this knowledge to protect yourself, to understand when you're being positioned as a scapegoat, to recognize when Law 26 is being used against you. You can use it strategically in your own career, not necessarily to manipulate others, but to avoid being manipulated, to structure your work in ways that give you credit for successes and distance from failures. Or you can try to be different. You can try to build power structures that don't rely on scapegoats, that maintain transparent accountability, where leaders take genuine responsibility for their decisions. This is harder. Much harder. Because you're fighting against thousands of years of evolutionary psychology and social conditioning. But maybe that's where real moral courage lies. Not in maintaining clean hands through clever strategy, but in being willing to get your hands dirty and own it publicly. I'll leave you with this question, and I want you to really sit with it. In your life, in your career, in your relationships, whose Ramiro de Orco are you? Who's keeping their hands clean while you take the risks, face the consequences, absorb the blame? And equally important, whose hands are you keeping clean? Who are you protecting through your actions, your sacrifices, your willingness to be associated with difficult decisions? Because until you can answer those questions honestly, you don't really understand your position in the power structures you're part of. You're operating blind, which means you're vulnerable. And in a world where Law 26 is constantly in operation, vulnerability isn't noble. It's just dangerous. The game is happening whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is whether you'll learn the rules before someone uses them against you. Power respects understanding. It has no mercy for ignorance, even well-intentioned ignorance. especially well-intentioned ignorance. So keep your hands clean. Or don't. But make that choice consciously, with full understanding of what it means and what it costs. Because in the end, the most dangerous position isn't having dirty hands or clean hands. It's having dirty hands while someone else appears clean. That's when you know you've become the tool, the proxy, the scapegoat in someone else's power play. And the truly terrifying part? It might have already happened. You might already be playing that role without even realizing it. That's how effective Law 26 really is. The best scapegoats never know they're scapegoats until the knife comes down. Think about that. Really think about it. And then look around at your life with new eyes.